Donald Trump's meeting with the EU presidents in Brussels was an eye-opener for Donald Trump. After following years of U.S. media, which have reported little to nothing on EU affairs and have launched many a headline of how the EU is going to fall apart, and also being misguided by those in the U.S. administration who also do not have a clue about how the European Union functions, Donald Trump did not have a positive view of the European Union. He had stated how EU regulations caused him conflict on one of his business deals, and his experience supported his view. His knowledge of the EU became even more tainted when he flanked himself with Nigel Farage, who is the head of the UKIP party and EU MEP responsible for Brexit, who also states the EU is a failed union and will fall apart. If this were not enough, there was the interviews with Ted Malloch, a man touted to be considered as the U.S. ambassador to the EU, who predicted a soon fall of the EU and Euro, and who made a statement that he was instrumental in one union being taken down, and there is another one that he can now help bring down, referring to the European Union. So what was Donald Trump's view of the EU? Not much different than most Americans. Americans, including the U.S. media and our own government, are clueless about the European Union and view it as a non-entity. Did that change when Donald Trump visited the European Union? Take a look at the frown on Donald Trump's face when he sat at the table with EU Parliament President Antonia Tajani and Vice President and Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Chief Federica Mogherini. Each represent the three leading presidencies of the European Union, with the Commission President the leading presidency along with his Vice President Federica Mogherini, who I've mentioned. The frown is clear. I would like to have known the president's thoughts at that moment. Could it be that he had been ill-advised? This was not what he expected? He did not expect a European Union that is alive and well and a major player on the global stage, a giant that is not punching up to its weight. The Financial Times is reporting that Ted Malloch was in Brussels ahead of Donald Trump's arrival. They also report that Donald Trump's administration denied knowing him, which Malloch claims is false news. After Trump's return, I believe we are going to see some changes after his eyes were opened and he saw for himself the sophistication of the EU empire, and he's going to further distance himself from ever knowing Ted Malloch. It will also affirm to Donald Trump that he is right about the U.S. media in not reporting real news. When Trump met with the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, he agreed to work out the details on trade, and for this, he is going to set up a task force. This is different than the bilateral trade agreements he was originally seeking with each individual EU nation. And we had an article yesterday that reported that Trump didn't even have a clue that those nations could not trade with the United States because they're part of the European Union, which goes to show the extent of European Union ignorance, not only within the U.S. American public, but within our government and media. Now that Trump has been to the EU and met with its leaders, it will be worth watching. He frowned in the face of these EU political heavyweights as if he was out of his league. And he was, because the European movement and EU federalism and the EU empire, that is an entire world that Trump had no knowledge of and had not been exposed to until he went to Brussels and met with EU leaders and walked in their buildings. It is what I have been talking about here at Prophecy Talk. EU ignorance is staggering, not only in the U.S., but even within the EU itself. Maybe after Trump's visit here on Prophecy Talk.